Hello, my name is Daniel Boettcher, and welcome to the first episode of my podcast, Shine. Today's guest is Dr. Lily Awatif Hanna. Lily is an old friend of mine, and she's also a dedicated physician and a mother. Lily, as you'll learn, is rooted in the rich cultural heritage of her Egyptian family. She was raised in the United States, but she remains deeply connected to her Coptic Orthodox Christian faith. As we will hear in the upcoming episode, Lily's journey reflects on the complexity of honoring tradition while also making her own path as a modern woman. In this episode, she opens up to us about her unconventional path to motherhood, the reason she chose that path, some challenging cultural expectations to build the family she always dreamed of having, and what she's done to live in the solution rather than living in the problem. I'd like us to drop into the conversation as Dr. Hanna, or my friend Lily, shares her story of resilience, family, and her own definition of what it means to belong.
I am an obstetrician-gynecologist. I'm a baby catcher.
Lily catches babies. Lily has seen the arrival of more humans in the world, I think, than most of us ever will. But when I introduced Lily, I used her middle name, which is Awatif. And why don't you tell us where that comes from?
That's my mother's name. So my parents are Egyptians.
So your heritage is Egyptian, and do you think that having Egyptian parents was an important part of your childhood?
Oh, absolutely. I think that it was important to have a cultural connection to that life while being here in the United States. And I was born and raised here. My parents moved here in the late 60s and early 70s, around that time. Some of the basic tenets of their culture and their heritage are still very much ingrained in our lives. And so we were raised not only as American kids, but we still had some of the foundation around Egyptian life.
Now, your parents are Egyptian, and the Egyptian culture was important to them, but your parents come from a minority Egyptian culture, isn't that right?
That's right. We are Coptic Orthodox Christians. The Coptic Church is one of the oldest churches, not the oldest, depending on who you're asking, of the Christian faiths. And of course, based out of Egypt. It was really at the beginning of the pre-Arab invasions. So we're looking at 0 AD to about the 600s or 700s AD. And the primary monotheistic faith in Egypt was Coptic Orthodoxy. And of course, because there are multiple councils that occurred throughout religious history, and these religions sort of broke apart from one another. But Coptic Orthodoxy has held its pride in being one of the oldest and most orthodox, if you will, faiths out there. And so there is an ancient language that is used, that of course Coptic, and which is no longer used, but Coptic is very similar to ancient Greek. And one of the precursors to Coptic is actually on the Rosetta Stone.
Oh.
Yeah, so it's Demotic, which is that language kind of in between.
Right.
And when we look at how these languages develop, Coptic is one of the outcomes.
I didn't know it was on the Rosetta Stone, and I find that fascinating. You know, the Jews famously left Egypt, right? So Egypt is, today a modern crossroads of many cultures, but has been at the crossroads of civilizations for a long time. And the fact that your parents are part of this minority Egyptian culture and then moved to the United States, where they must have been an even smaller minority in their religious practice. And
the reason why they moved to the United States was freedom, of course, freedom and opportunity.
Right.
And they achieved that. And one of the things that my father was set on was creating a Coptic Orthodox presence here in New Orleans. And I am happy to say that that was successful. And we did indeed start a Coptic church that has grown over the last 30, 40 years.
Well, I will tell you that I was at your father's funeral, as you know, and at the point when the young men of the congregation picked up his coffin and carried it to the other side of the iconostasis was one of the most beautiful and memorable things that I've ever seen. And I remember having a prideful envy of your dad at that moment, because in order to get that kind of reception at the end of your life, he obviously sowed the seeds of being a good man, and I was very proud of him.
He was the best man.
The purpose of this season of our podcast is to talk about problem solving. And the reason why I've wanted to talk with Lily about her heritage so much in the first bit of this conversation is because the problem that Lily has said that she wants to talk with me about today is one that is all about family and heritage.
So I wanted to talk to you today about how I had my son. And he's 9 years old. He's a beautiful, bright boy who has a blossoming personality, which I'm trying to support, even though it doesn't always align with mine, which is to be expected. He is his own unique individual. But at the same time, I think the reason why I wanted to speak with you about it is because it's not a very traditional model, particularly coming from my heritage. And we'll rewind about 12 or 13 years ago. I'm a single woman living in New York City. I'm an OBGYN. I'm 37 years old.
What's an OBGYN?
Oh, excuse me, an obstetrician-gynecologist.
Right. Doctors speak in short terms, or short takes.
So I'm an OBGYN in New York City, and New York is beautiful and wonderful and very fast-paced, and everyone is there on their own path. And when I was there, one thing that dawned on me in my mid to late 30s was that I was still single and childless. And I knew that one of my life goals was definitely to be a parent. And due to circumstances, which includes relationships that didn't pan out, I found myself at 37 years old wanting these things. And so I decided that more than anything, since I'm an OBGYN and I know how the medicine works a little bit, that I'm going to go and freeze my eggs. So at 37, I decided that let me go and see some of my colleagues. They were my teachers, right? So I've known these guys for a while now. I said, I need to freeze my eggs. They said, sure, absolutely. Take these medications and we'll do a small procedure, save your eggs, and then when you're ready to start a family, at least you'll have these 37-year-old eggs and maybe not a 40 or 41 or 42-year-old egg. And I said, okay, great, let's do it. And when I went in for that appointment, I was told that my fertility options were substantially decreased. My numbers, quote unquote, didn't look great. And I had the fertility of somebody who was past 40 years old. And when my colleague / former teacher told me this, he even gave me a hug because he said, this does not look good. I said, all right, I need to regroup, come up with another plan, and see where we go from this. But initially, I didn't want to be disappointed. I said, no, it's not possible. I'm only 37 years old. The numbers aren't that bad, right? So I stepped back from fertility for a few months. I started some birth control pills. I stepped back from it. I said, let me quiet the system a little bit with some birth control. And that's just how it works. And then I went back to him and I said, okay, let's try and freeze my eggs. And at this point, I was pushing almost 38. We tried for about a year. I took all the injections. I'd spent tens of thousands of dollars on medications. And at 39, after not getting anywhere with egg freezing, and I tried, and it failed, I realized that there was no egg freezing happening, and that the decision at that point was to try and have a child. And so the cycles began again. And between the ages of 39 and 40, I tried and I tried and I tried different medicines, and we tried all the things.
And by cycles, you mean menstrual cycles?
Menstrual cycles, intrauterine insemination, in vitro fertilization, all the cycles. With people that would even consider having a child with me, with sperm donors, all of it, purchased or otherwise, if you will. So at the end, when I was about to turn 40, I looked at my colleagues and I said, you know what, I'm going to go on my 40th vacation. This is a big year for me. And we'll regroup afterwards. And I said to myself, I said, I'm going to give this one more try when I come home. And if it doesn't work, then I might need to try something else. Adopt, get an egg donor, something else. But I'm going to have a child at the end of this. Because I knew that. I said, you know what? Maybe I just need to go to a different doctor. I just need a different pair of eyes. And so I went to my first doctor, the one that I had always seen, and I said, look, this time I don't want to take any medicines. Right? I'd like to do this as naturally as possible. Just a good old turkey basting, intrauterine insemination.
Okay.
I know, that's sort of the slang, but that's really what it was.
Right.
And he said, well, you've just got to take one shot, like the day of or the day before, and then we'll just do this naturally. I said, okay, great. And in the meantime, I made an appointment with an Eastern medicine physician who was also a fertility specialist, because I said, whatever we're doing, it's not working. I need a different way. And the guy that I was planning on going to was clearly on top of his game. He was rather popular in the New York area.
And this
so I knew
basically a Chinese doctor.
It was a Chinese doctor, right?
Okay.
And they literally were like 3 blocks away from each other, right? The two different doctors. So I'd gone to my physician, and 2 days before I was supposed to have the insemination, I remember it was a Wednesday. He said, all right, so order the sperm sample. Let's make sure it's in the office, and we'll go ahead and set you up. Take the injection on Thursday, come back Friday, and we'll do the insemination. I said, great, let's do it. So I go online on Wednesday, and I realize the sperm donor that I had been using all this time, quote unquote, ran out. Said, oh my God, I have to make a decision on who is going to potentially be the sperm donor of my child within the next 12 hours. So there I am, perusing online furiously. And I finally find one, and I said, this one looks great. I decided to go with plan B, and I go in and I get the insemination done. And then about a week later, I go and see the Chinese doctor just to see what happens. And he tests me, and he says, look, your numbers for your eggs or whatnot, it's not terrible, it's not great, it's not terrible, but let's see if we can work with it. And he calls me later on that day after drawing blood. He said, your pregnancy hormone level is elevated. Have you been taking any injections? I said, yes, but I also did this sperm donor and intrauterine insemination a week ago. He said, okay, great. Come back in 48 hours. Let's see what happens. It should go up if you're pregnant. It should go down if it was just a medicine side effect. So I go back 48 hours later, and the number quadruples. And so I knew that
You're pregnant.
I'm pregnant. My mother certainly knew about what was happening. She knew why I wanted to have a child. My parents were just surprised at the method.
So how did that intersect with a traditionally Coptic Egyptian household and at this point, I'm going to say we were middle-aged, highly educated, sophisticated American woman who wanted to have a child this way?
So culturally speaking, what I did, particularly in terms of the church, it goes beyond the culture, but particularly in terms of our faith, it's not something that is addressed. Adoption is identified in our community but other methods of conception, particularly outside of a marriage,
Right.
are not considered recognized. But it's a very traditional faith that doesn't always address non-traditional topics. And fortunately, it is working in that direction, and they understand that younger people have more world knowledge and world understanding. And we are a tight-knit community that believe in supporting our younger children to excel in life.
So you're at this interesting spot, which is with a beautiful 9-year-old who is itching to be every bit of his 9-year-old self, with a professional woman as a mother, and you're single today.
Yes.
With a grandmother that lives up the street who loves him very much. What does his life look like?
Oh, I would have never done this if I didn't think I couldn't provide him a wonderful, exceptional, extraordinary life. His day-to-day life is that he's in a wonderful private school here in the city. It is a good life for him, and it's a good life for me.
If you could tell a 50-year-old Gabe something to remember about his heritage, what would you say to him?
Well, as my father said, he comes from a long line of Pharaohs. And I would say that Gabe comes certainly not only from a long line of Pharaohs, but he comes from a family of great love.
You love your son. May
So
every
much.
child be loved like that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. You know, he asked me the other day, he said, Mom, if somebody gave you $1 trillion, would you take it if it was for... I said, no. You are worth more than $1 trillion, sweetheart. You are priceless.
Well, the tears in your eyes right now speak all of the words that you can't say.
Yeah. I had Gabe because I loved him before I even conceived him. And no, he's my sweetheart. He's my everything. And I want him to know that when he goes forth and he sees, because we certainly have, in my family, we strive to be the best version of ourselves. And I want him to know that I strive to be the best version of myself, and part of that was having him. And that I hope that in his life, when he's 50 years old, that he realizes that it is the best way to live, and he achieves it for himself, and that he has the love and support of family and friends. And if I know Gabe, he will. Because the basic ingredients are there. He has love. He's got a good brain on his head. In his head. And he's got will to do the things that he finds are important to him.
And the shoulders of the Pharaohs to stand on.
That's right.
That's amazing. I want to ask one last question before we stop talking, and that is the problem that you've described, which is the problem of wanting to have a child and using a non-traditional way to achieve the child. How does that help you understand your place in the world?
I think that, if anything, there's a lot of self-doubt that is created in order to maintain norms that aren't created by you. And it's important to create your norm in life and what you consider your standard in life. Because in the end, the only person that you have to answer to is yourself. And if you realize that at the end of your life, you haven't at least tried to achieve the things that you set out to do, that you're never going to feel truly fulfilled. There are two big things that I really wanted in life. I wanted to be a doctor, and I wanted to be a mother. And I achieved those things. I would say that more than anything, just believe in your thought process, believe in yourself, and you can't go wrong. Because in the end, that's all that matters.
Thank you for sharing this. It's special to hear a mother talk about her son, and the kind of vulnerability you've allowed us to share with you right now is substantial, and I think we all appreciate that. And I'm so glad to talk to you about this and listen to you shine. That was an incredibly moving story. Lily Hanna has just gotten to the heart of some very complicated issues with us, including her family heritage, her place in the family, and her need and desire to raise children, which of course leads us to the absolute miracle of conceiving a child, and the miracle of modern medicine that allowed Lily to conceive a child the way she did. Now, before we wrap up here, I'd like to share with you something special, which is the design brief that I wrote about the conversation that Lily and I just had. You see, when I design a piece of jewelry, I use my instance as a conversation with another person rather than looking at the materials or the skill at the jeweler's bench as the way to start the piece of jewelry. The design brief I wrote is called The Timeless Elegance of Heritage, a journey through a strand of pearls. You can read or listen to me reading the full design brief, along with seeing images of the drawings, the renderings, and the finished piece of jewelry on my website at theintrepidwendell.com/shine. I'm really looking forward to our next episode, where I'll be talking with my cousin, Dr. Graham Boettcher. Graham is going to share with us his deeply personal story of transformation and self-acceptance. The conversation I had with Graham is deeply moving, and I really, really encourage and look forward to seeing you there. Lastly, but not least, if you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe to the podcast and share it with someone who might love to hear Lily's story. You can go visit our website for more behind-the-scenes content. Thank you for being here, and thank you for listening to my interview with Lily Hanna. Thank you for sharing a part of your time with me today. My name is Daniel Boettcher, and I love to hear you shine.